I'd like to say good morning to everyone. As Lieutenant Knowlton talked about, I'm here to cover three different things this morning. Reflect on the community safety in 2013, to talk about what's going to be our direction in 2014, as well as open it up for questions that you may have of me. Before I begin my comments, I want to acknowledge command staff members that are here today. We have Captain Mike Allred, who is the Commander of Crimes Against Persons. We have Interim Deputy Chief of Support Services, Troy Livingston. We have Captain Gavin Seiler, who is the Commander of Property Crimes. We have Captain Daryl Letterberry, who's the Commander of Records. And we also have the Commander for Field Services Division, Deputy Chief Nelson Mosley, that are all here today. So if I don't have the answers to your question, I'm going to look to this esteemed group for a little bit of help. First of all, let's begin with the homeless outreach pilot program that we initiated back in 2013. One of the questions that I get quite a bit within the organization, as well as in talking with some communities, why? Why was it important for the department to do a pilot program of that nature? There are several reasons. Number one, it allowed us to connect homeless individuals with community resources. It also allowed us as an organization to be able to prevent criminal activity that involves homeless as victims as well as homeless as suspects. The other thing that was important was to be able to reduce the number of calls to 911 that may be related to the homeless population as a whole. The other thing was a great opportunity for us as an organization to build trust as well as establish a positive working relationship with the homeless individuals, because they're not embracing law enforcement. They've seen over the years as far as the number of crimes that's been related to homeless, and so we had to look at how we was going to address that. The other thing is to assist with getting in place and stabilize a home environment, because so many of them, as we know, have lived on the streets for as many as 20 years. And so when we're able to work with community resources and get those individuals into a stabilized home environment, it's a win-win for each and every one of us. Ironically, one of the things we look at is stats. Okay, what's been some of the statistical information that's been accumulated? 23 people that have come in contact with the homeless officers have been able to obtain full-time jobs. Thus far, we also have had 36 people that have been reunited via the bus program that we have, where we're able to buy them a one-way bus ticket back to where they may have come from as far as their city, with the understanding that a relative, family member is going to be there to meet them and hopefully help them to get established back in their community somewhere else. We've been able to provide assistance to about 400 homeless people that we've come in contact with as far as community resources. I know one of the questions that we've gotten quite a bit, well, what is the status of the homeless outreach program? We're currently evaluating it because when you look at the pilot component of it, we pull resources from the streets. We pull 3 officers from their normal beats as well as a supervisor to begin to implement this pilot program. As we continue to evaluate it, one thing that we have to look at as an organization is being able to identify how do we sustain maintaining those levels of personnel without robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that is part of our discussions that we're having. The pilot program is continuing until we get those types of questions resolved. We have not discontinued, but rather it's going to continue in a pilot stage as we work through the budgetary issues that are associated with it. The other part of that is having vehicles, because right now when you look at 2 of the 3 homeless officers, they are community policing officers who have take-home vehicles, and so that's something we have to work through. The other thing that's important to keep in mind, and we go back to the tragedy that happened in Newtown, Connecticut, where the children were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary, and then there was an outcry for gun control. There was an outcry for more mental health resources to help individuals and those kind of things. Well, we as a police department, we realize that our officers, we need to make sure our officers have as much information, many tools are equipped to get the job done. And so what we did was, beginning in the June 10th class of last year, we increased the number of hours that our officers receive when it comes to dealing with individuals that have special needs. Prior to last year, we had about 30 hours that we identified addressing special needs. We increased that to 40 hours because, like I said, our goal is to make sure that our officers have all the necessary equipment, the information, the training, so that way we can continue to be proactive as we deal with individuals that have mental illness. Our goal is not to have to respond once they're in a crisis, but if we can get notification, identify some indicators, we can begin to connect them with resources immediately. And so that's been important. The other thing was important in 2013 is the fact that we had 17 homicides. And the reason I say we have 17 homicides, we were able to charge the homicide involving Mr. Brian Shipman. He was the individual that was killed back in March. He died several days after the robbery. Well, the individual in that case, Mr. David White, was eventually charged back in January. And so that's why we have 17 homicides. When you get the statistics, it's going to show 16, but in reality, we have 17. Even with, when you look at 17 homicides, one homicide is too many. But what is really concerning is when you have 4 unsolved homicides, that is even more concerning because we're not doing the family justice as far as being able to determine why. And those 4 homicides, the first one that I'm talking about is Mr. James Gary. That happened on July the 13th of last year at 11th and Meade. That case is still unsolved. Mr. Lemmy Alford, that happened on the 24th of July. That case occurred at 15th and Green. Mr. Colby Hopkins occurred on the 22nd day of September, 100 North Meade, there in Old Town. And then the fourth one is Mr. Damian Williams. It occurred at 4406 East Harry, and that one occurred on the 29th of October. It's awful hard for family members to begin to go through the grieving process, to begin the healing, if they do not know why. Why was my family member shot down so violently? And we continue to appeal to the public to help us to solve those four unsolved homicides because we need their help. All 4 of those cases, there were witnesses. People saw what happened. People saw the suspect. They know what the suspect looks like. And we're asking them to come forward and give us that information to help us to solve the cases. And I know a lot of times I hear, well, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of retaliation. I'm afraid that I'm going to have to testify. Well, I understand that. I understand fear is a tremendous prohibitor when it comes to going to court and doing the right thing. But at the end of the day, it's important for us to do the right thing as far as witnesses and giving us the information. If not for the police department, do it for yourself, do it for the family members that are wanting answers to questions as to why. Why did I lose a loved one? The other thing that's important in 2013 as I look back is our continued effort to engage the community. You know, as we talk about statistics, which I'm encouraged by, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Citizen engagement is important to this organization. It's important to any form of law enforcement throughout the country. If you don't have citizen engagement, how can you have a safe and secure community? And that's important for us. That's why we utilize social media to get information out, to receive information. Through social media, we've been able to solve a lot of different cases that have occurred in this community. Citizens have truly been our eyes and ears as we go forward. Engage in neighborhood associations. A challenge that we've continued to see over the last couple of years is the dwindling attendance at neighborhood associations. And some of that has to do with there's so many things going on, or as far as different distractions within their families. But we have to continue to look at how can we develop strategies that would allow them to be connected not only to the police department, but also to their associations as well. Working with WIN, the Wichita Independent Neighborhood Associations, we continue to work with them because they were one of the initial part of the three-legged stool back in 1993 when community policing came on board. Community policing, neighborhood associations, and government accountability. Those were the 3 parts of that stool that were important going forward at that time, and they continue to be important here in 2013. We continue to utilize our crime analysts in the field. We're into our second year, where each one of the substations has their own field crime analyst. That analysts analyze crime trends that occur within their respective bureaus. From that information, they get with the captain or their supervisor, and then we develop strategies to respond, whether it's a burglary trend, robbery trend, auto theft trend. We try to be proactive in responding based on that information that we're able to get. Businesses, working with our businesses. The Wichita Organized Retail Crime Coalition continues to be a tremendous partner with us as far as addressing crime that impacts their businesses, shoplifting, embezzlements, and those types of crimes that we face. Traffic safety is another issue that we had some challenges. We'll continue to have challenges. As I get through the latter part of my presentation, I'm going to ask Captain Atterbury to give an update on where we are as far as the e-citations. That's a project we've started about a year and a half ago to give us an update on where we are from that standpoint. 2013, we finished an additional important part of our reorganization, and that being we now have assigned sergeants to investigations. The property crimes now has 2 sergeants. Eventually, the persons crimes is going to have 2 sergeants. We've also assigned the commission personnel of the accident follow-up unit is now part of crimes against persons. And the question is why? Why would you move accident follow-up to person crimes? It's very simple. Number one, when you look at a death, whether it be by a vehicle, gun, knife, a death is a death. And so it's important to have a section that focuses on death investigation. And that's why we moved the accident follow-up unit to the robbery homicide section is to be able to make sure we have consistency in how we investigate any type of death within this community. The other thing we did as far as the AFU is we moved the non-commissioned or the quality control staff that reviews all of the accidents that are submitted in this community to records, which makes sense. It's a good fit because records is the official keeper of our documents, as well as quality control on any reports that our officers generate. Let's talk a little bit about statistics, which Lieutenant Nolte is going to give you. Crime was down in Wichita. That's the bottom line. Crime was down in Wichita. When you compare crime, total crime to 2013 and 2014, 2012 and 2013. In 2012, there were a total of over 70,130 total criminal incidents in Wichita. Last year, we had a total of 67,410, which is a reduction of about 4%. When you ask the question, how do we do with major crime? Major crimes are your auto thefts, burglaries, larceny, rapes, robberies, homicides, aggravated assaults. Major crime was down about 3.4%. So when you look at total crime, which includes your major crime, it was down in the city of Wichita, Kansas, which has been good for our community as a whole. There were 2 categories that we did see an increase. One was our aggravated assaults. They were up about 4%, I do believe. And then we also saw an increase in the number of auto thefts in this community. The question is, okay, Chief, why did we see an increase in our aggravated assaults? Between March and June of last year, we saw an increase in our gang violence. There were a couple of gangs that were feuding intensely during that time. It related to a homicide that happened back in May of 2012, and so between that period, we saw an increase. After that period, we began to make some adjustments in our enforcement efforts, our targeted efforts, to be able to bring that under control. And so that's what was driving those numbers. When you look at auto thefts, one of the things that we're constantly concerned about is the number of vehicles that are left unattended and warming. Just to give you an idea, I was talking with Captain Seiler. Just year to date here in 2014, we have 150 vehicles that were stolen as a result of being left unattended and warming. Last year, we had 113 for the entire year. We have surpassed the entire year in just 1 month. And I understand the importance of of convenience, wanting to get in a warm vehicle and all of that, but we have to make sure that we're all doing everything we can to be preventive, that we don't leave our vehicles running. If we do, let's be in them, let's bundle up good, and things and those kind of things. Even when you go to a convenience store and you see people standing around outside, be cognizant of that. I mean, there's so many crime prevention things that we can do so we don't become a victim. But there again, we need the public's help to be proactive when it comes to reducing those numbers. Clearance rates, you're going to get those statistics as well. I'm encouraged by the clearance rates that we've seen throughout last year. And there's several reasons why we've seen such exceptional clearance rates during 2013. Number one is the level of partnerships within this community. You know, you look at the Wichita Sedgwick County Crime Commission, the fact that they have financially offered rewards that helped us to clear quite a few significant cases in 2013. The other thing is involved citizens. Our citizens have been involved in reporting information, being good witnesses, calling 911. That has been important. You as the media, you've been great when it comes to disseminating information. I mean, once we get videos, whether it's a bank robbery or some other type of crime that has video, you get it out there quickly, and we definitely appreciate you helping us from that standpoint. And then the other thing is dedicated members of this organization. I mean, I'm proud of the efforts that our members give, because they know that we're charged with making this community safe, and we cannot do it by ourselves, and that's why I talked about initially the importance of partnerships. We got to have those going forward. I talked a little bit about gangs. You know, how is our gang stuff? How did our gang statistics compare to previous years? When you look at it, there was a slight uptick in the number of aggravated assaults involving gang members, and it goes back to that few that I talked about. But as I look at 2013, there's been some positive things that we've done throughout 2013 to help us as we try to, there again, continue to manage our gangs within this community. The Kansas Attorney General's gang-free task force, we were part of that task force that was able to get a state version of the RICO Act in place, the Racketeer Influence Corruption Organization Act. And so that's going to help us as we focus not only on gangs but other individuals that are running a criminal enterprise here within the state of Kansas. We don't have to rely on a federal agency to be able to get charges. Now we have a state statute that will allow us to get that accomplished. The other thing is the fact that we've been able to prosecute more gang members last year than we did the year before. In 2013, we prosecuted 13 gang members federally, whereas we prosecuted 10 in 2012. So we've seen an increase in our federal prosecution of gang members. We seized 82 guns last year compared to 79 in 2012. The other part of that is the fact that the FBI, to their credit and to their commitment to this community, has assigned one of their FBI agents to work with our gang unit, because we know that gang members have connections throughout the United States. And we've seen some of the benefits of the FBI agent being assigned with our gang unit. And so we're going to continue to try to focus on that as we go forward throughout the year. An area of challenges that we encountered is going to be traffic. When I look, our DUIs were down. I mean, we only made 1,350 DUI arrests in 2013. That is a concern. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that it's not. But there are several factors that come into play when I look at those reduction in the DUI numbers. Our staffing levels, we were down last year. When I say down, we had almost about 40 plus positions that were actually vacant. We had 28 officers in recruit class that weren't on the street. We had another 13 that we're going to now fill in 2014. But we also had 17 members that were on medical leave, that were on medical assignments, or what we call administrative assignments. They were not on the streets. We had 6 officers that were deployed, activated as far as the military. So when you look at all of those numbers, it's going to impact some areas on the street. And so we made a conscientious decision to focus on addressing the crime trends In doing so, we saw the reduction in our DUIs, and that's something that we're going to be working on. When you look at the 30 DUI fatalities, there are several factors that come into play. 10 of those accidents involve speeding, where people were speeding at the time of the accident. 8 of them involved inattentive driving. In other words, people were being distracted, doing something else instead of paying attention to driving their vehicles and being aware of their surroundings. 5 of them were medical conditions, where individuals suffered a medical condition which resulted in the accident and subsequently resulted in the fatality. And of course, we had 3 that involved run the stop sign from that standpoint. So there again, those are some of the causations. When I look at the victims, 12 of the victims were the actual drivers of those vehicles that caused the accident. 6 of the victims were passengers. 6 of the victims were pedestrians that were hit by a vehicle. And then of course we had 6 that involved motorcycles at that time as well. So that gives you some idea on our traffic fatalities. What is going to be the focus of the department in 2014? Traffic safety and traffic enforcement. We're going to meet with our officers, and we're going to raise our expectations on traffic enforcement. We're going to conduct more traffic enforcement assignments. No, we're not going to do speed traps as people have a tendency to say that we do. We're telling you straight up front, we're going to change your behavior. If that means writing tickets, we're going to write a lot of tickets. It doesn't mean that we're doing quotas. When I look at 30 traffic fatality victims, that is unacceptable. 1 is too many, 30 is really too many from that standpoint. We're going to continue to utilize the social media as far as getting information out to the public, to drive safely, to pay attention, because everybody has a responsibility when it comes to operating that vehicle. We all do. I do, you do, because that vehicle doesn't go by itself. Somebody's got to operate it. And so we have to have that level of personal accountability and personal responsibility while operating those vehicles. That is a deadly weapon, and so we need to do as much as we can. We will continue to focus on, there again, looking at crime reduction as well as clearance rates, engaging our citizens, continue to engage them. They're the eyes and ears. Wichita is about 164 to 165 square miles. We cannot put an officer on every street corner, but what we can do is engage our community, enhance our relationships, get them to report different criminal activities, continue to be a good witness, because 13 of our 17 homicides were solved because of many different reasons, and citizens were part of that, the fact that they were a good witness. From the standpoint, when I look at our beat officers being more proactive as far as their beats, because next week we have 25 officers that will be completing their field training program. They will be out on the streets. So we increase those numbers rather quickly with that occurring next week. The other thing that's going to be important to us is continue to look at technology. What technology do we need to be exploring to allow us to become more efficient and effective and making sure we provide quality services? And so that is one of the things that we're going to be really looking at. That's where e-citation comes into play as far as tickets. Being able to allow the officers to spend less time writing tickets, less time for the motorists to be parked along the highway, which addresses safety concerns. Body cameras. We're going to continue to look at tapping into federal dollars to help us to increase the number. Right now we have 48 body cameras that we've purchased with federal dollars. We just recently added 8 new ones to the field. That's what gives us a total of 48 at this point in time. We're also going to look at digital storage, because as law enforcement continues to evolve, technology continues to evolve, guess what? You got to be able to store that information. And we saw in 2012 that we can take up a lot of storage when it comes to digital evidence in a heartbeat, or digital storage in a heartbeat. And so that's something we're going to be focusing on. We're going to continue to work with other area law enforcement agencies. You know, you think in terms of human trafficking. Last year we had 26 cases with 29 victims that we investigated that involved human trafficking. We charged 14 different suspects that were connected to those different cases that I just talked about. We will continue to target our gangs, just like we've done in the latter part of 2012 when we've done. We will continue to target those specific gangs. We're not going to do a shotgun approach. There is a top 10 or top 15 list that we have that we go after. Yes, we go after them because we can show that they're creating havoc in this community, and we will continue to do that as an organization. We will continue to look at crime trends because that is part of what we do. It's part of our philosophy as community, as far as community to policing philosophy. Looking at crime trends and being able to divert resources to help us to make a dent in a timely manner. Not waiting 2 or 3 months down the road. We want to be able to respond timely when it comes to those types of issues. We're going to be working on some ordinances within the city. Some of them dealing with scrap metals. I mean, that is on our list to look at because we know scrap metals continue to be a concern for the business owners, and so we're looking at that. I can tell you that we have done special assignments involving the scrap metal dealers that have not been in compliance with city ordinance. And we'll continue to do those assignments. We'll continue to issue them notice to appears to make sure they're in compliance with what's expected if they're going to operate in our community. And so with that, that's a lot of information that I'm going to open it up for questions. And
Chief, you talked about the disappointing numbers on homicide closures, but I noticed that the closures of rapes has gone up pretty significantly over your 6-year average. Does that reflect a change in how you're attacking these, or what do you see there with that number?
I think it's a combination of several things, and if I don't have the answer, I'm going to look at Captain Allred over here to my left. I think the fact that citizens are reporting more, and we're getting a level of cooperation. We have community organizations that are really work closely with us. I know that Lieutenant Randy Reynolds has worked closely with the Sexual Assault Center over the last several years. I mean, we've worked with them over the years, but I think we have intensified our efforts to really get people to report it and follow through. And so I think those are just some of the factors.
On the 4 unsolved cases, I mean, you touched a lot that there are witnesses in all of those and things, but can you remind the public again that these are active cases, that you guys are always looking to solve these and they are of a priority?
The 4 unsolved cases are active. I mean, the detectives are constantly following up. Any information that we get from the public we try to follow up on it. We don't try, we follow up on it. We rule out nothing. Everything is important to us because we owe it to the victims, we owe it to the families, we owe it to this community to make sure that we're giving due diligence when we do get bits of information. We don't just say, we'll just put it over here, we get to it. No. Detectives, the supervisors, I mean, they're constantly following up on things, and they will tell you that the chief is constantly asking them on the status of our open homicide cases, not only in 2013, but also previous years.
Those 4 homicides, I may be forgetting some of them. I know at least a couple of those are gang-related. Are they all 4 gang-related?
Well, when you say gang-related, I mean, I go back to the fact that some of those victims may have been gang members, but we haven't been able to determine that it's been a gang homicide, but because of the fact we show them in our database. Yeah. I think there's maybe, 1 of the 4 open that we can show that there's a gang connection, just 1 out of the 4.
The reason I bring that up is there's just kind of a culture of not wanting to talk to police, or is it really just straight fear of retribution?
I think it's both of them. You know, a couple of years ago there was this big phenomenon that spread across the country. Don't tell, don't snitch. We're seeing it here in Wichita, as well as the fact that I don't want to testify because if I testify, then I'm viewed as a snitch. Or if I testify, is there going to be retaliation against me or my family? And that's why I go back to the fear factor is very prevalent when it comes to making those decisions. But at the end of the day, it's important to do the right thing and overcome your fear to help families to get closure and understand why Why did Mr. Gary get shot? Why did Mr. Alford get shot? Why did Mr. Williams get shot? Why did Mr. Hopkins get shot? What was the reason? And that's what the family wants to know more than anything, is why.
And Chief, you talked about the traffic fatalities and that sort of thing. You know, you say traffic enforcement. I guess what should people expect when they're out there driving? Are you going to have more patrols out watching Kellogg? You know, talk a little bit more specifically about what people can expect to see.
Actually, I'm going to leave that up to Deputy Chief Nelson Moser and his commanders as far as what the plan is going to look like. The challenge we have is to step up our enforcement, how we get it done. I know that they've had several meetings looking at data, looking at locations, but the other part of that is visibility, making sure we're visible and that we're out there writing tickets and everything else. And I know last year I got quite a few complaints from citizens that got tickets, and as I try to tell them, you know, we're focused on reducing traffic accidents, particularly fatalities in this community. And so we all have a responsibility to do that. So.
These car warm-ups, thefts, I mean, that's a big number, especially from the start of this year to whatever. It's gotta be it's just one of those crimes that I see like is so preventable because you could lock, you know what I mean? There's ways to do it. What can we advise our citizens out there to do a better job of?
Turn your vehicle off, lock your vehicle, go in and get whatever you need to get from the convenience store, come back in, get in your car, and drive off, because your car is not going to get that cold in a matter of 4 or 5 minutes. And like I said, we live in a society of convenience. You know, we want to be able to run in right quick, come back, and go. But things have changed. People actually drive around looking for cars that are running, and they're going to steal them, and they do steal them. And then they joyride them, they strip them, they do other things with those vehicles. So lock your vehicle up. Don't run it. Don't warm it up unless you're in there. And I know people say, well, he's trying to tell me, I'm an adult, what to do. No, I'm saying we need your help to prevent the number of auto thefts that are happening in our community. We all have a responsibility to do what we can do to prevent that, because as you said, it is preventable. It's preventable.
Do you have a ballpark of how many of these occur at businesses as opposed to out in front of people's driveways?
That I don't have that information right now.
How many gang members are there in the city? Is it 2,500? Is it something like that?
Well, if you look at the database, I mean, we probably have about 2,500 that are in the database, but not all 25 are active. I mean, many of them are inactive, but because we'll keep them in there for 3 years in case they do get active. But from the standpoint of the active ones, you're talking probably maybe within 100 or more.
We've seen a pretty marked drop in gang members arrested 3-4 years in a row now. Do you attribute that to having a better hold on the situation than you did 3 or 4 years ago, or some of the strategies are working and therefore there's less arrests now?
There's no one. I think there's a combination. I think the fact that the gang members know that we have stepped up our aggressive efforts to address them as far as the violence in this community. Community programs are more prevalent in our community. The fact that the judicial systems have really come down hard on gang members. And so you have a variety of reasons where gang members are realizing that I don't think I want to go to jail. I think I want to try to get out of that culture, because you're right. We have seen a reduction, particularly in our arrests. We're out there, but I think gang members are realizing that I don't think I want to go to jail.
So Chief, if I'm looking at this right, of the 17 homicides in 2013, 10 were gang related.
Well, there again, you're talking about 10 individuals that either were victims or maybe suspects in a crime. But yes, 10 of those are part of those 17 total.
Is that high? I mean, of the 17 murders we had in this city, 10 involved were gang related. I mean, to me, that seems...
How does that compare to past years?
Not really. I mean,
No.
The key there is victims. I mean, you'd go back to the question, how many of those 10 were actually gang-on-gang related crimes? There was only one of them.
Only one.
But you look at the other 9, they were gang members that
Shooting
were
innocent.
associated with that crime as a suspect.
Okay, so it doesn't mean there was feuding gangs shooting
No.
each other.
Did you want to add anything else?
Well, we use the term gang involved as there's a gang member
Why
involved
don't you,
in it.
Come on.
Brett?
We typically define it as gang involved if there's a gang member involved somehow, some way, victim, suspect. It's not, like the chief mentioned, a rival gang on another rival gang on most of these cases. That was where we would say it's more gang related than gang involved. So we try to define that so people understand. We don't have a bunch of gang members out there fighting against each other. It's just one of those who are involved in this incident. So
So I guess it might lead you to think that the gang members in our city are very violent. In that 10 of the 17 murders in our city, there was somebody involved in a gang involved in that murder.
well, I'll tell you this, and that's why we've got this group of detectives and working with the FBI to target those most violent criminal street gang members in the city. Not all of them, would I say, are violent gang members. Now, anybody that shoots and kills somebody, yeah, absolutely, they're considered violent. But we are working right now on tracking probably 10 or 15 of them with this task force that we have with our partnership with the Federal Bureau of Investigations to hopefully put a dent in that, put some of these individuals that are violent individuals in our community in jail. And we've been getting some pretty long, significant jail time sentence or federal time on some of these individuals. As the chief mentioned, we had more federal cases this year, which typically they'll get more time in the federal system on some cases. So we're going to work diligently this year in 2014 to make sure we continue those efforts. Do we like the number of homicides or gang-involved homicides? Absolutely not. Like the chief said, one's too many. So we're going to work really hard this year on education, prevention, and really some enforcement efforts this year on gang-involved activity.
She may have addressed this in her question. I'm thinking of it in a slightly different form. Do those numbers reflect a much more, the gang members are more willing to use violence to resolve conflict, in the sense that you've got 10 of the 17 homicides involve gang members in some way?
I think as a society we've seen that more recently. If you look at some of the shootings throughout the country, mass shootings and stuff like that, I think society in general's increased that, and we've seen it here in Wichita too. But I wouldn't put that focus just on gang members. I mean, I think that society in general, we're being a little bit more violent or seeing a little bit more violent activity throughout the country.
Captain Atterbury, if you want to come up right quick and just talk about e-citation. As I mentioned, e-citation is part of our traffic safety efforts. Go ahead.
Well, as you know, we started our project back in 2012, and we put our first units on the street in 2013 in June. We used 16 traffic officers to use the handheld units, and now we are expanding currently to laptop units. So we will have 175 units in the field that will be car-based. The software will be on the mobile computer terminals in the cars. The officers will have printers and driver's license readers in the cars to process those citations. The training will begin in the next couple of weeks for officers in the field. That'll be shift-based training, so that the officers who are training them will be able to assist them out in the field with learning how to use the units. And in the next couple of months, it'll take several weeks to get everybody trained. We will have a fully trained field services bureau in the use of the e-citation software and the hardware.
Thank you, sir.
I was going to say, overall, Chief, I mean, we've got a lot to be proud of with what we've done last year. Can you just kind of give a little statement to maybe that accomplishment, like how you're feeling about these stats overall?
Well, like I said, crime is down in the city of Wichita, and it's down because of a collective effort. We cannot become complacent. We have to continue to work hard as a community, as a police department, keep moving in the right directions. And so I'm extremely excited about the fact that we have seen crime down. because sometimes we get an unfair label by people outside of our community that Wichita is not safe, and the numbers speak for themselves. Wichita is a safe community to come, shop, enjoy yourself, and everything else. So with that, I just want to say once again, thank you for your time, and thank you for your effort as far as our successes in making this community safe. So appreciate it.
Chief, one question, sorry. You talked about officers on the street. How many officers do we have on the streets? Do you know that number around?
Not right offhand. I can tell you that we're authorized about 435 for field services is what we're authorized.
Okay.
And you said
I can get those numbers.
part
for
of
you
the
guys. I'll get them.
part of the deficit that existed last year will be offset by the 25 officers completing their field training here in the imminent future, next week or so.
Next week.
What plans do you have to make up the rest of that deficit that you addressed, or that you spoke to earlier?
Well, you're hoping that those that are on extended medical leave are coming back as far as their injuries and those kind of factors. I know we should be getting some of our military personnel back as well. Those are things we have practically no control over, because we can't tell somebody you need to heal yesterday, but rather we're at the mercy of their doctors releasing them back to work, and then so that's going to help us from that standpoint. And like I said, the military, they've been activated by the military for a reason, and so we're at their mercy. But we know that the current 26 that are in the field training officer program, they'll be hitting the streets next week on their own and not have to have a field training officer.